Welcome to the Life Plus God podcast. My name is Alyssa Robinson. I am your host. And today I have a very special guest, Lily Bird. Lily, I'm so glad you're here.
It is great to be here. This is the first time I ever do this, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, Lily is a congregant here at Truch Memorial United Methodist Church. And today we're asking the question, should I share my story? And the reason that Lily is here with us is because I don't know if I've ever met anyone so on fire to share their story. And one of the things that we acknowledge within the United Methodist Church is that faith sharing is a spiritual practice that not only can enrich our own lives, but can enrich the lives of the people around us, can enrich our relationship with God, our relationship with each other. And so to see someone so excited about faith sharing is just, it gets me excited. It makes me want to share my story more. And so hopefully Lily can inspire you to share your story, because I'm going to do a spoiler alert. Should I share my story? Yes. So Lily, let's just start talking about faith sharing at a high level. Why are you so eager to share your life stories?
Okay, because it feels like literally my soul is on fire. I feel like I am lit from within, and I think it's really starting to show. I went through the depths of depression where I could hardly even speak. I didn't want to get up out of bed. And this was a downward spiral over the course of not the last 3 years, but maybe the last 5 to 6 years, where it was like a slow drip. So I really didn't see it coming until I started falling into that deeper and deeper depression. And coming out of it, it was literally like God had ripped the Band-Aid off of my eyes and I could actually see, and I was experiencing life from my soul outward, and everything changes. It's not a change, it's a transformation, and I just feel compelled to share my story.
It's like you just can't hold it in.
No. And you know what? I've had comments at work where this one coworker that met me a couple of weeks ago, I've only been at my job a little less than 2 months. And he basically told my boss, I just met a Lily Bird. And she was like, yeah, and he said, she is like 1,000-watt light bulb. So I took that as a good thing. I'm going to take that and run.
Yeah.
So
this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine.
I'm going to let it shine, shine, shine. And I want other people to join me because I am just chomping at the bit. I met Gracie literally right after she had started.
Oh, yeah, Pastor Gracie.
Pastor Gracie. And I told her, I said, I ran into her and I said, ooh, I've got a story to share. When can we meet? And she was like, well, we can do it, over the phone or, no. I said, I can feel your energy and I want to feed off of that and I want to start serving. So we had that initial meeting and she showed up with a couple of, with a notebook and she was ready to start taking notes. And I kind of blew her away after 45 minutes. She was just like, she was floored because she was probably going to give me a couple of little things to go look into and say, maybe she'll volunteer, maybe she won't. And she kept kind of changing it up, switching pages, going, let me rethink that. So I could see the wheels turning.
So what are the things that you hope to accomplish in sharing your story?
I still believe that there is a tremendous stigma tied towards mental health issues. I think pretty much we all struggle with them, but a lot of us just don't want to admit that we're struggling with our mental health. It's always somebody else has this problem. Because one of the things that Gracie mentioned is, Lily, as many prayer requests as we get, we seldom get them for somebody who wants to pray over somebody who is suffering from depression or some other mental health issue. So it is still, even though, you have celebrities coming out about their mental health struggles, as long as it's somebody else, we're going, yeah, that's great. It's wonderful.
They're so brave.
They're so brave,
strong.
but
yeah.
I'm not going to own up to it, or that my family, somebody in my family is struggling with it, because we take it as a very personal, secretive thing. And when we don't share, other people don't know that are suffering from depression. They don't know that there's hope. They don't know that there's somebody else that's basically stuck in the same rut that I was. And mine got really, really bad. I mean, to the point where I was suicidal.
Well, I wanna get into your story and your mental health journey, but it sounds like you're just looking to help other people feel like they're not alone,
Absolutely.
to be able to start a journey for themselves of reflection, and if someone is struggling with something similar to what you went through, for them to seek help.
That there is help out there.
And they're not alone.
They're not alone, and that you can get better. I thought that I had no hope. I thought I had every mental illness in the books. And I have had issues with depression before, but they had never gotten as bad as they did especially this last year and a half. It was so bad. I had so much anxiety that triggered deep, deep depression that I didn't even know it was depression. I thought I was schizophrenic, I was bipolar, I had a brain tumor, something. It wasn't depression because it was so bad. That's not what it could be because I didn't recognize it. So I got into a deeper and deeper depression.
All right. Well, let's get into your story a little bit. So when you were telling me about your story, the very first thing that you said to me, which was just captivating, because you are like 1,000-watt light bulb. Like, you're just so energetic and upbeat, and people can hear it in your voice. And when you sat down on my couch, you said to me, April 26th of this year, I was in a mental health facility.
Yes.
And then you started your story.
Yes.
And I was instantly captivated. So can you walk us through a little bit of what you told me?
Okay. I will try. Here goes. April 25th, that evening or that morning, I took a couple of Xanax. And Xanax is something that you take to kind of regulate that depression. It kind of takes the edge off. So I'm supposed to take one. I was supposed to take one, and it's about 4 hours duration, but it kind of levels you off. If you're getting really anxious, it helps to level you off. And so instead of taking one, I took two. And I let my husband know, and he totally freaked out because he thought she's trying to kill herself. So he emailed my psychiatrist at the time, and he basically said, I cannot help you. You need to seek help. She's tried something, and you need to go take her somewhere. You need to take her to like a Carrollton Springs. So he had a conversation with me, and I agreed, and I said, let's wait till tomorrow. I said, I promise I won't do anything. We'll pack my bag, and then we'll go. I agreed to go because I was basically trying to tell him that I needed help without actually uttering the words help. And I will get to that piece later. But I had issues with actually asking for help. So that next day, the 26th, we drove to Carrollton Springs, and you have to fill out paperwork, and they ask you some specific questions, very basic. I don't really remember what it was, but they're basically trying to gauge where you're at, if you're suicidal, and I was. So yes, and I looked. I should be about 125 pounds. I was weighing 109 pounds, and you've seen my picture. I looked skeletal would be a good way to put it. And I've actually shown that picture to some really close friends that know me, and they didn't recognize me in that picture. They said I looked worn, I looked old, and they're like, that's not you. That's not you. And it was. So I went into Carrollton Springs basically barely alive, and I had no desire to live. I guess there was something in me that was seeking help. I didn't know what it was at the time, but there was still this little light because I didn't take myself out. So for some reason, I kept going, and I decided I wanted help. I didn't refuse. I went in. Now, the first couple of days that I was there, I didn't want to be there. I mean, it was literally the one who flew over the cuckoo's nest. I mean, I was seeing the line where you go get your medications. I had been very withdrawn. I was in a room with somebody else, and I freaked out. I'm like, here, I need my privacy. Here I've been basically isolated at home, hardly seeing anybody, including family. And all of a sudden, I find myself in this place, it's kind of antiseptic looking, and there's, you share a room with somebody else. The doors actually have openings because they need to be able to see you, the medical staff, and you can't close the door. I tried closing the door, and I got in trouble almost immediately because they're like, nope, you can't close the doors. The showers have pull away curtains because they don't want to have anything anywhere that you could use to potentially take your life.
Yeah. So
So
it's scary.
it's scary.
Vulnerable.
Yes.
It's a new place.
New
It's
place. You don't know anybody and you don't want to talk to anybody and there's no place to hide and they have structure there.
Mm.
So here I'd been basically laying in bed I'm not laying on the couch or, in bed. I didn't really want to do anything because I was so depressed to having a schedule. And, you have a certain time for breakfast, for lunch, for dinner. They have group activities and processing time, which I didn't really know what that was at the time, when you process through your thoughts and your emotions and basically what's going on inside your head. And that's what they call process time.
Well, and you, because you had been postponing process time for years at this point. And so you had told me that looking back on it, like this was a really hard time, but being in this facility was an answer to prayer.
Absolutely.
Can you walk us through what led up to this point? Because you said this was a 5-year journey leading up to this.
Yes. What happened is I'm basically an IT professional, information technology. My formal title was Senior Applications Developer. I used to work for a retail company that's no longer in business, but it's very, very fast-paced, very cutthroat. I mean, it's retail. In retail, you have to be 100% up in your applications. Anytime that there's an issue, you have to tend to it. And when I was on call basically 4 months out of the year. But that by on call, I mean 24/7, like a doctor, where if you get a call, you have to answer the call. And I would go into work for a regular day. I usually start at work at about 7 o'clock in the morning and would end at 3:30 to 4 and drive. I was in downtown Fort Worth. I had to drive. It was a 45-minute drive because I was basically off traffic hours. But afterwards, if I was on call and we had issues at work, I'd have to get logged back on at home because I could work from home. So I was working at work, but then also at home on weekends. Sometimes I would get called out of a church service because something went down, because literally our application had components running 24/7.
So there was no boundary or balance between work and home.
No, there wasn't. So, if I wanted to I literally remember one time sitting down going, okay, my workday's done, sitting down with a glass of wine going, I need to take the edge off. And literally my phone going off and me looking at it going, oh, geez. So I'd have to get back online, put the wine back, and then go back and work. And, and at the time I had a daughter in high school. And all of this was happening around 2017. That's when I got married. And I also had my cancer scare. I had a lumpectomy on the left breast in 2017. So those were two major events that happened. And so my husband moved to my house in 2016, and we got married in 2017. So there was an adjustment period, a new marriage. So I had a new marriage, a daughter in high school. I mean, she's a great, great girl, but she was a teenager. So, you go through the typical issues that you have parenting a teenager, a very stressful job, and a new marriage, and the cancer scare.
Yeah.
And in 2019, I also had a really terrible car accident. So I was going about 65 miles an hour and I hit a concrete barrier. And that was a God thing that it didn't kill me. I drive a Honda Accord and it literally totaled the car. I crawled out of the car, but I was okay. I mean, I was totally jarred. So that happened as well. And that was in 2019. And I had a boss that was very demanding, and I was in the same group for 19 years. I was just fed up. I wanted to go to a different group. And he knew I knew everything about that application, so he didn't want me to move. So he told me, sorry, you can't. And that about killed me right there. So between all of that going on, knowing I was stuck where I was at, and kind of feeling, because I had been in the same position, and I knew it was just very repetitive and I didn't feel challenged. So my self-confidence was eroded, to where I felt I'm not very marketable anywhere else. So I was stuck.
Yeah.
I felt stuck. And when was I going to go interview when I was working all the time?
Right.
Or they were like, well, yeah, you can take classes. You have to do it on your own time, and it's like, when was my own time? I didn't have my own time. So all of that contributed to the downward spiral.
Well, and you mentioned, learning about processing time, that was a new concept to you. So my guess is you didn't process any of this as it was happening.
Basically, there was no time to process anything. It was just almost like what is it, just flying by the seat of your pants. And it was just very reactionary because that's the way work was. You just reacted. You were putting out fires all the time.
Yeah.
So it was just kind of fumbling through life, just existing, just trying to get through each day and going, okay, I made it through today, because literally my phone going off was a trigger. Because if it went off at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, I knew it was a work call. And I knew I had to wake up in the next, minute or two. As I went upstairs, I was waking up because I immediately had to log on and call somebody from our operations team to kind of get some more details on what our issue was. And then I had to resolve it. And we had escalation issues. So we had to respond within 15 minutes or we'd get the second call. And then they would start calling other people because the issues had to be resolved. So think about trying to use your brain at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning.
I'd rather not.
And then drive back into the office once you fix the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it's so many different layers, and it's very clear to see how this will lead to like mental breakdown and physical breakdown.
Oh, and it did happen. It happened in 2019. I actually had a panic attack because I finally told my husband, I can't do it. He goes, no, you can't. You got to quit. So he helped me. He helped me put together a resignation letter, in terms of what I was going to type up. So I was kind of torn because there were coworkers that I absolutely loved. I hated my boss, but I loved some of the people that I worked with, some of the business partners that I had. We developed relationships over the course of time. It wasn't just a working relationship. These were people that I would go to and we would talk and have discussions and we would commiserate and kind of go, woe is me, because we were all in the same boat.
So there was some grief around.
There was a grief around
this
just
decision.
And also I didn't tell them I was planning on quitting, but just around the stress level that we had at work because the company was struggling, so people were constantly getting laid off. So it was discussing that, how we were all getting more and more work as we had fewer and fewer people there. So it was stressful for my coworkers as well. So that's how we would commiserate. We kind of hold each other up. We knew each other's pain, basically. And so it was difficult to say goodbye to them. And I really hadn't told anybody anything. So I was just going, I have to stop. I have to quit this job for my own mental health. But I didn't want to. So that morning that I went to resign, I literally started having a panic attack. And I had no clue what a panic attack was because as much stress as I had dealt with, it had never driven me to a panic attack. And as I got off the elevators, I could feel my body tightening, my arms, my chest started to hurt. It felt like I was having a heart attack. So once I thought I didn't recognize what was happening to my body, which I can read my own body, I was going, oh my God. So I started hyperventilating. So guess what? That's kind of like you start the ball rolling and it just gets worse. So the more I hyperventilated, the more panicked I got, the more I hyperventilated. Then I started getting a tingling sensation in my fingers. So by this time I've made it to my desk and it's cubicles. If you've ever been in an office environment where you had cubicles. So I got into my cubicle. I tried to start typing my resignation letter and I couldn't do it because my fingers started cramping up. And then I started sobbing because I was panicking. I'm starting to hyperventilate. I'm panicking. And this is about 6:30, 6:45 in the morning. There's nobody there. Well, there was a contractor there. And he comes running over because I'm sobbing. And he's like, are you okay? And I went, no. And he says, do I need to call 911? And I said, yes. Well, they had it set up to where the phones, when you dial 911, it actually reaches somebody there. They have kind of like almost like a work-related sort of a SWAT team. So some guy came up and they started talking to me and I was freaked out. They're like, you need to calm down because I was speaking very quickly and very agitated and they were trying to calm me down. And I was like, I need to see a professional. I don't know what's wrong with me. I need somebody to tell me what's wrong with me. So that I literally had them bring an ambulance and I was taken to the closest hospital there in downtown Fort Worth for an evaluation. And it pretty much was, they just gave me some fluids. They checked everything, my heart, everything was fine. And it was basically a panic attack. So that was my first experience with a panic attack ever. As much stress as I had in that, I was at that place for 19 years. And at 19 years, That was the first panic attack I had ever had.
Mm. So this happened in 2019.
2019.
What took us from 2019 to 2022?
I basically could not go back. At that point, my brain was messed up. Something was wrong with the chemical balance in my head. I am a very analytical, cognitive thinking person, but I'm also very emotional. And what I found out from therapy and from the psychiatrist is that things kind of got wonky. And my emotional side kind of took over the cognitive. And so when you're driving with a purely emotional brain and the cognitive is literally in the back seat, stuff comes out, thoughts are totally messed up. So at that point, once I had the panic attack, I started, I didn't want to take pills. So I was fighting the whole, let's get you some pills, let's go see somebody. I didn't want to go see anybody. So my husband kind of snuck me into the therapist that I saw the psychiatrist that I saw for 3 years. And he started basically experimenting on me. They give you different medications, and they would either bring me down or take me up to. So it was literally, I felt like I was being pulled in all directions. And that period was really ugly because I would act out. These medications that he was trying on me were not working. Mm-hmm. And then he put me on, I think, lithium. And I was like, golly, I was just trying to just stop. So I said, yeah, everything's fine. Well, it wasn't. So he kind of kept experimenting for a couple of years and nothing was working. And so that's when I started kind of slipping into further depression, because this time I had been working my entire adult life. I tried to go back to work. What I did was I took a FMLA. Mm-hmm. I took leave. After I had the panic attack, I did not go back. And 5 weeks later, I went back. And I was messed up, so I couldn't do an analytical job the way I was thinking. I was very emotionally driven, so I couldn't do my job. So after literally a few weeks, I decided to resign because I was like, I can't do my job. So that really depressed me because, I kind of identified myself through my work. Yeah. And so I couldn't do my job anymore. So that really started the super deep spiral downward, because I never went back to work until just recently.
So through all of this time, there is just like the rapid fire of tough events happening in your life, all of these layers. Then in 2019, basically your body tells you you're done.
Yes, pretty much.
You got to fix this.
My body did it for me. My body did it for me.
But your brain didn't catch up to your body. You were fighting it, right?
Absolutely. So it was this mental, emotional struggle inside my head. And it literally, especially the last year. So it was a kind of a slow burn into deeper and deeper depression. But the last year and a half was really like the depths of depression, where, inside my head was basically a living hell. Yeah.
So where does spirituality come into play in all of this? What was your relationship with God like when you were going through all of this?
To be honest, it was not good. Now, I would say, God, please forgive me. I don't know what's wrong with me, but I feel like a horrible person. And I basically felt like I didn't deserve God's love.
Well, why did you feel like a horrible person?
Because I was messed up. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing that is hard for me to get people to understand is I wasn't thinking right. I thought I was, but my thoughts were mine, but they were messed up because of the emotional driver. Not the cognitive driver, the emotional driver. When you take away the cognitive and you just have a majority of emotional, it's messed up. So even though I thought I was thinking straight, I really wasn't. And I wasn't going to get righted until I got the proper medications to stabilize those. Something chemically got wrong in my head. And so when you ask these questions, I wasn't in the right frame of mind.
It's hard to explain.
It's very difficult to explain because as much as I hate taking medications, I know for a fact that without those medications, I would not have been righted. And one of the things and I can't remember what the medications were, but when you read the label, it said for racing thoughts. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what the heck is a racing thought? But think about it this way. Think about your cognitive thoughts. Think about your emotional thoughts. And you know how sometimes there's an emotion that's tied to a thought, right? They go together. Well, think about spinning those in a tornado inside your head. That's literally the racing thoughts. It's memories, thoughts, feelings, everything, but it's all garbled up in this tornado, and it is a hot mess inside your head, and you cannot make sense of anything. And that's why I could never focus for more than 10 minutes maybe, because everything was garbled up. I couldn't take a shower. It was like, oh my gosh, it takes so long. I got to do the shampoo, I got to do the scrubbing,
It was overwhelming.
It was overwhelming, and I do mean everything overwhelmed me. Eating overwhelmed me. I have to go to the bathroom afterwards. Oh my gosh, that's overwhelming. Do we have enough toilet paper? That's overwhelming. I don't want to have to go to the store. I don't want to have to eat because then I may have to go get something and I'm going to have to get in the car. Oh my gosh, I can't drive. I can't focus. How am I going to drive? So little by little, my world shrank and shrank and shrank until I was literally confined to my house. I got to the point where I told my husband, I can't drive anymore. I'm afraid to drive. And part of me wanted to just go ram into a post somewhere. Those were the kinds of thoughts that I had. But again, they were messed up thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and so you were crying out to God, but
was.
Still felt distant from God,
Yes.
like you didn't deserve God's grace or God's presence, and yet you were still seeking this relationship. And so where do we go next with that spiritual piece?
Okay. And again, it wasn't just God. It was my entire family. My daughter means so much to me. Guess what? Because my husband was living there with me. He was the one that had to put up with all of this and was seeing everything. But my daughter had moved out in 2020. So I spent the last 2 years just with my husband and I at the house. And my biggest issue was with my daughter. I felt so guilty because I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to talk to my sisters. I didn't want to talk to my mom. I used to talk to my mom every single weekend without fault. So as soon as, I asked my youngest sister, I said, when I was better, I said, when did you notice that something wasn't right with me? And you know what she said? About the time I had the cancer scare. And I said, well, no, not the cancer. I said, just when I wasn't acting like my normal self. And she said, about the same. So my family knew something wasn't right back in 2017 because we're so emotionally deeply connected. We know each other. We know our patterns, our habits, the tone of our voice. So the tone of my voice started changing. The things I said, I started to isolate, talk less and less and less until I was not answering phone calls. So my mom was desperate for me to return calls. My sisters were desperate. My sister would come by periodically, but she had to basically force herself over. Because I didn't want visitors. I didn't want to talk to my daughter because I was ashamed. I felt embarrassed. I also felt, I don't want to put this on her. She's studying. She has her own issues. She suffers from a little bit of general anxiety. I thought, that's the last thing I want for her is to have to deal with me. So that's how I made it make sense for me, in terms of why I pulled away from God and from my entire family, except for my husband who was there. Yeah. So basically, what the Holy Spirit was showing me is, Lily, it's almost like It's a Wonderful Life. This is what your life is like with separation from God and separation from family. It's my living hell. So the last year and a half was basically the Holy Spirit showing me, Lily, for you, this is hell. And I never want to experience that again. So at Carrollton Springs, after about the third day that I was there, I was in treatment for 7 days. After about the third day was when I started to see changes. I showed you the little therapy cat. I don't know if that was maybe day 4 or so, where I could actually focus enough that I did one of these little projects where you put these little beads on a little thing and it made a cat. And then they iron it. Of course, they didn't let us touch irons, because we weren't allowed to do that. But we went with our little thing and then they pressed it. And I was so proud that I kept my therapy cat because it took me about 20 minutes to put together. And I hadn't been able to focus for 20 minutes in years. So to me, that was like, oh my gosh, this is a sign that I'm getting better.
Yeah. Well, and although you were pulling away from family never gave up on you.
Oh,
they were
no.
praying for you. And that's one of the things that you told me that was just such a beautiful part of this story is that Carrollton Springs was an answer to prayer. Of course, you had been crying out to God. So it was an answer to your prayer, probably not in the way that you expected.
No.
But your family had also been praying for you.
Okay. And this is what my family did is about a month before I, took the pills and went to Carrollton Springs, about a month, before my sister, I had had a conversation with my youngest sister. And I basically was saying, over the phone, I said, I can't do this anymore. I can't take this pain anymore. I don't belong here. I can't figure anything out. I'm useless. It's hopeless. I can't take this pain anymore. And she took that to mean this is really, really bad. She was thinking it. I know she's suicidal. And she had seen me. I was looking worse and worse every time she did see me. So she had a conversation with my parents who live in El Paso. And she also had a conversation with my middle sister. So I'm the oldest. So it was my youngest sister, my middle sister, and my mom and dad. And she said, I'm going to put this together and I'm going to conference everybody in every single Sunday. And we need to pray out loud for Lily because this is really bad. And we've been trying to figure out what's wrong with her for years, and we haven't been able to figure out, but it's really bad now, so we need to pray out loud. And so they would pray every single Sunday without fail. And my mom and dad are Catholic, so they basically got their beads, and they were wearing down those rosary beads. Mm-hmm. They pray for everybody, but they were specifically praying for me together. And when they found out that I had gone to Carrollton Springs, the first thing they all did was, oh my God, we had no idea how quickly this was going to happen, that their prayers were answered. And it wasn't them just praying. It's like, I have so much extended family. I have a cousin who lives in Ciudad Juarez, who is a pastor. No, he's a priest because it's Catholic Church. He's a priest. They had him praying. I don't know how many people were praying. My ex-mother-in-law is also big into the church. So she had her whole army of friends and people that she really cared. They're very involved with the church. So I have no idea how many people were praying for me, but it was an army of prayer people. So wow. it was, and I started feeling the changes, and the better I got, the harder I fought.
Well, and I was going to ask, so when, because I think that looking back on it, it's clear to see where God is at work in this story and the ways that when you're crying out to God, God is saying, I'm still here. I'm here. I'm here throughout all of this with your family, with people reaching out to you, with the support coming your way, even with the psychiatrist trying out these medications. So many people put in your path to try and help you. When did you start to feel God's restoration, that realization happened of, oh, God is with me?
Okay. Well, let me go backwards a little bit, because one of the things I do want to point out is I actually uttered these words, and now I think, why in the world did I say that? But what I would do is when my husband would go off to the gym is when I had my fits. I would literally, there was a lot of rage in me because I was mad at myself. I was mad at the world. It's like, I want to go away. I don't want to experience this anymore. I just want to be done with this life because it sucks. And what I did was I actually cried out, and I was looking up, God, why have you forsaken me? Mm-hmm. Here I've got all these people praying for me, and I'm saying, God, why have you forsaken me? And I'm like, now I go, seriously, Lily, is that what you were really thinking? You were really messed up, to put it nicely.
But also, I want to acknowledge it's okay to have felt that way. Like, I think that we've all felt that way at certain points and maybe the question is different. Maybe it's, why are you doing this to me? Why did you let this happen? Mm-hmm. Whatever the question is, when we cry out in our most desperate moments, it's when we're at our most vulnerable, our most honest, our raw moment. And I think that it's moments like that we reveal our heart to
Absolutely.
God. I mean, Jesus did it.
Yeah. And you know what though? That's what I have to, it's in scripture. I was the most broken I have ever been in my life. I mean, there was no farther down to go. Mm-hmm. I was basically 109 pounds, skeletal, ready to die. How much further could I sink? Not a whole heck of a lot more. Mm-hmm. So I was at my worst. And then the prayers and God and all of the people that were in my life at that point in time came together. And then through therapy, through my between the psychiatrist doing the medications and the therapist. So I needed a combination of medication from the psychiatrist and therapy. The therapist I'm going to say her name, Naomi at Carrollton Springs. I told her as I was getting better, I had tears welling up in my eyes, and I said, thank you. Thank you to you and the entire staff. You saved my life. Mm. It was that impactful. And she had her eyes welled up. And therapists know when you're throwing a bunch of BS at them. And she felt my honesty. And through some of the not really assignments, but they give you these pieces of paper that have questions to fill out. So they gauge kind of where you are, whether you're a spiritual person or not, what's important to you. And I said, my faith is very important. My family is very important. So based on those questionnaires that I was filling out, she knew which kind of how to guide the direction to try, as I was doing my processing, to try to figure out, how do I help this woman? I mean, that's her job. How she is depressed, and I have to figure out why. Yeah. And I have to do it in a short time frame. I was there for 2 weeks because I was paying 100% out of pocket. I wasn't working, no insurance. So she knew she had to get as much as she could out of me because she knew I was paying out of pocket. And she was very, very, very conscious of that. And just tried to get as much as she could. But when I thanked her, she said, "You know what, Lily? I just guided. You did all the work." And I was like, wow. But a lot of times what I did was I threw myself under the bus repeatedly with guilt over my daughter. I felt guilty over not spending more time with my daughter. And she said, "Lily, you had a very stressful job." And I said, "Yes, but I also went out dancing with friends and I spent too much money. I went through a period where I spent too much." Lily, show yourself some grace is what but she said that because, again, of what I had filled out in my questionnaire saying that faith was very important. So she said, show yourself some grace. You were just trying to have a little fun in that crazy life of yours.
Yeah. So it feels to me that restoration was happening in that 2 weeks. Naomi was a big part of that. Your family's prayers were a huge part of that. You saying yes to the experience was a huge part of that, and saying, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm going, and God just opened up so many opportunities for restoration. When did that restoration start to become spiritual transformation? Because you're not the same person you were before.
Oh, no. And I thought when I went through my first divorce that I was transformed. I got more involved in the church, but then I kind of started slipping back up, into my old habits because, again, what work was doing, it kind of sucked me back into that hole. So the transformation really started about more towards the end of May. I had finished my, I had 7 days in treatment and then 10 working days outpatient. So after I finished my outpatient, it was about mid-May. And then at that point, I continued to take the medications that I had. And all I was doing was getting better. Because again, at this point, I am fighting. I am fighting because I know it's all starting to come back. And little by little, I got better. So what I started doing was, my house hadn't been tended to in 3 years. Remember I told you I did a lot of couch surfing? Mm-hmm. A lot of TV watching, just kind of laying around, not wanting to do anything.
It's probably overwhelming to clean up after yourself, overwhelming to throw something in the trash. Like all of these little things just add up over time.
And then it gets worse. The bigger the mess, the more overwhelmed you are. So I literally had been, because it got this bad to where I really couldn't focus. I mean, every little task was like a major thing. So even I had a piece of I remember doing this. I had a piece of paper. And I was like, the garbage can is way over there. I don't want to have to go outside and throw the garbage out. So I'll just grab this piece of paper, wad it up, open up my vanity or my cabinet underneath my vanity, threw it in there, wad it up. I don't have to deal with it. There's a piece of trash in there. I'll have to deal with it later. It was that bad. Totally nonsensical, but again, very emotionally driven, but very garbled up.
So I kind of want to step outside of your story for a moment, because this is just, it is such an incredible story that you have. And anyone who's been listening to it, now you hear what I was telling you of, she is on fire.
Yes,
this
ma'am.
Girl is on fire. Just wanting to share everything. And I'd like to hear, because one of the things you talked about is the stigma of mental illness and how it took you a really long time to admit. Were there other people who shared their stories with you that helped you feel like you weren't so alone in this time?
Well, actually, while I was at Carrollton Springs, because the therapy there is not individual therapy, it's group therapy. So there are people there with issues as well, because it's all mental health, and they put you in, they have like 4 or 5 different wings, depending on how they classify you. And that happens when you fill in the intake paperwork. They kind of gauge where you're at, what your mental state is, and they put you with similar cases, but it's not identical. So not everybody there had depression. I would lay awake at night, like at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I felt the power of the Holy Spirit in me, kind of pushing me to start doing things. It's like, I have a story to tell. I need to tell it. And that's why I literally ran to Gracie to say, I need to volunteer. I need to do things. I need to help people. And so the first thing I thought of was I need to speak to my mental health and the journey that I had and how empowering this was and transformational, and how much closer I feel to God, and how I want my soul to shine. And I want to use words that express that, not just my words, but how I have a body that I use. You see, you're looking at my hands, right? I am very, very, I don't know. I speak with my hands as much as my voice and my face, and my entire being is telling the story, not just my voice. And I've got a very animated voice. I can speak very, very fast, slow, high, low. I'm not monotone by any means. That and just the excitement that I feel to share this story. And I'm fluent in Spanish, so I want to help the Hispanic community here. So I want to do things there. So it's just like I have got about 1 million ideas if you're willing to listen.
So if you were to sum it up, and let's go old school fable, what would you say is the moral to your story?
The moral?
Yeah.
The moral is, oh my God, open up your soul. Let the Spirit of God in and discover what your spiritual gifts are, because we all have them. And I just figured mine out, and I am so excited to use it in service to God. And isn't that what we're supposed to do?
Yeah. Well, okay. So someone's listening. They heard your amazing story and they're inspired. They're thinking, well, I have a story, but maybe they're a little bit nervous about sharing their story. What encouragement would you give them? Because maybe not everybody's as outgoing and outspoken and so quick to jump in and say, I have a story. What do you say to someone who's like, oh, should I share?
Oh, what I say is absolutely, because we all have a story to share. We are all broken in this world, and we all have something that isn't working in our lives. And when we share, other people feel they're not alone. And that is extremely important, that we are not alone, that other people have the same kind of pain that I had, that somebody else has. Because other people suffer from different things. There's somebody I know that's a neighbor that's going through a painful divorce right now. Mm-hmm. So if you have a story to tell about divorce, which I also have that story.
Same here.
But again, that's helpful, because again, we go through things that we think, I'm going through this alone. I'm the only one that can deal with this, and that's not true.
Well, I love that you use your story in service to others, and that you do have this excitement. And I know that you told me, you were like, hey, this is just one of many, one of many stories about relationship and connection with God, and how you've seen God at work through your life. But thank you for taking a moment out just to share this one with us and your excitement. And now it makes me want to go out and share my story,
all right,
which I've done a few times. Maybe our listeners are tired of hearing my story at this point. They're like, no, bring in more people like Lily.
Hey, I have plenty of stories to share. If there's anybody willing to listen, I am willing to tell them, and I've got a few.
Well, thank you so much, Lily. And I want to encourage people listening, if you've been thinking about sharing your story, or you just want to talk to somebody about what your story could possibly be, I want to encourage you to go to tmumc.org/mystory. There you can get some resources on how to share. And you can also, we have a form that you can submit your story and get the process going, and I got some news for you. I'm the person on the other end of that form. So if you're filling that out, you're coming directly to Alyssa Robinson, and I'd be happy to have a conversation with you anytime, because faith sharing is one of the spiritual practices I love most. That's why I do this podcast. That's why I, write for our blog and all the things. Is I think faith sharing is just it's one of my favorite things.
And you know what? This actually isn't very painful. I have never, ever in my life done a podcast, and this was a piece of cake. This wasn't hard at all.
I'm so glad to hear that. Lily, thank you so much, and I hope to have you on again.
You're very welcome. I look forward to it.
The Life Plus God podcast is hosted, written, and produced by me, Alyssa Robinson, and sponsored by Treach Memorial United Methodist Church in Flower Mound, Texas. If you live in the Flower Mound area, I invite you to stop by and see if Treach could be your new church family. You can learn more about all of our programs and events at tmumc.org, and I hope to catch you next week for our next episode of the Life Plus God podcast.